Get ready to master the 4 parts of the IELTS exam, which are the reading, writing, listening, and speaking. In today's video, I will discuss each part in detail, and this is our second video of our 9-video series for IELTS preparation for beginners. So let's get right into this video. So in the IELTS writing section, you will be given 2 different tasks, which are IELTS writing task 1 and task 2. In IELTS writing task 1, for the academic exam, you will be given some sort of visual such as a bar graph, line graph, pie chart, and you have to analyze this graph and you have to write a summary that will be 150 words minimum. And for the IELTS writing task 1 general section, you are required to write a letter, which will be either a semi-formal letter, informal letter, or a formal letter. So maybe you have to write a letter to your boss or manager requesting some time off, or maybe you have a broken toilet in your house and you will be required to write a letter to your landlord requesting for some repairs. So depending on the exam you are taking, the writing task 1 will be completely different for academic and general. Then moving on to writing task 2. In writing task 2, for both academic and general sections, you will be required to write an essay that is a minimum of 250 words. And depending on the question type you are given, you have to make sure that you format or you structure your essay in the right manner, because every different question type in writing task 2 is completely different, and in order to get a high band, you need to make sure you write your exam in the proper format. And if you need some assistance on this, make sure you check out my IELTS Writing Task 2 booklet down below. You'll get the direct link to that, where I have broken down all the different essay structures you may see in IELTS Writing Task 2. So now moving along to the IELTS Reading section. So in the IELTS Reading section, you are being assessed on your ability to read the written text in English, and then you are able to answer some questions based on that particular passage. So you will be given a few passages in the IELTS reading section, and you only have a limited time of 60 minutes to locate the answers in these 3 to 4 different passages and find the correct answer. This could be very tricky for lots of students just because there are so many different question types you may see in IELTS reading, and each question type is completely different, so it could be challenging, and you need to familiarize yourself with the different question types so you are not wondering, how exactly can I find the answer in IELTS reading? And don't worry, this will be an upcoming video in this video series, so make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss the next video that comes out on the IELTS reading section, where we will go into the question types in every single detail, as well as tips and tricks on how to locate answers fast. So guys, if you like this video so far, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you are notified every time I put out videos on this channel. So next is the listening section. The listening section actually assesses your ability to how well you are able to listen to an audio and find the answers based on the questions the exam will be testing you on. So you will be required to listen to a few different recordings. This could be range from 2 people talking about a bazaar, within a bazaar, maybe putting in an order for a few books. Or maybe you will even hear 2 people talking about a project they have to do at work or at school. And just remember, the first recording is usually a lot easier than the other recordings that you will hear, because the recordings gradually get difficult as they are played. So part 3 of the IELTS listening exam, for example, you will hear multiple people talking about within an academic setting about maybe a project or maybe even a lecture that's happening within a lecture hall. So you need to make sure that you are familiar with the different English accents you may hear, because you may hear an English accent of someone from the UK talking, for example, and they may use certain slang or certain words that you are not familiar with. So you need to ensure that in order to successfully pass IELTS listening, you become familiar with the different accents. You become familiar with the different audio recordings you may hear. And don't worry, as I mentioned, this will be part of our IELTS preparation for beginners series. So make sure you stay tuned for that video as well. So next we move on to the IELTS speaking section. This is usually the most challenging part for students because you will be sitting with an examiner and the examiner will be asking you questions face to face. So the IELTS speaking section actually has 3 different parts: IELTS speaking part 1, 2, and 3. And once again, as you go through the different parts, the questions get more challenging. So in the IELTS speaking part 1 section, the examiner is just trying to get to know you. He may ask he will ask your name for sure. He will ask you what you like to do on the weekends. He may ask you what type of living arrangements you live in, such as an apartment or a house. He may ask you questions about your hobbies. So you need to make sure that you know exactly how to format your answer so you get a high band. And if you are not sure what exactly to expect, what types of questions in IELTS Speaking Part 1, make sure you check out this video up above of IELTS Speaking Part 1 questions and answers you should be familiar with so you are able to get a high band in IELTS Speaking Part 1. And guys, I just want to clarify, please do not try to memorize answers. You should not memorize answers. Rather, you should try to use the same type of format when you are answering your questions. Because trust me, the examiner is smart. He will know that you tried to memorize an answer and you will get a low band. So don't even do that. Just try to understand the formatting of how exactly you should be answering your questions. Now moving along to a little bit more challenging IELTS Speaking Part 2. So in the IELTS Speaking Part 2, the examiner will give you, this part is called the IELTS Speaking Cue Cards question. So the examiner will give you a set of questions and he will give you 1 minute to prepare an answer for these questions. So you need to make sure that you quickly jot down some notes of how exactly you are going to format your answer to speak for a full 2 minutes. So the examiner will set a timer and you need to be able to speak about this particular topic for a full 2 minutes. So you need to make sure that you outline or you brainstorm ideas for you to be able to speak for a full 2 minutes. Because if you speak for 1.5 minutes, you will get a low band. The whole point of this is for the examiner to see how comfortable you are in natural spoken English and how comfortable you are in carrying on a discussion between you and the examiner. So if you are not able to do this, you will get a low band. You need to make sure that you also remember that you can't just answer the question. You need to make sure that you have a good transition sentence between the questions. You need to make sure you have a good introduction sentence. How are you going to introduce the topic the examiner is asking you? How are you going to conclude the topic the examiner is asking you? You're not just going to tell the examiner, okay, I'm done talking now, because that doesn't sound good. That's not how natural spoken English is, and that's not how native English speakers talk. So if you are able to think of ideas of how to introduce the topic, how to conclude your discussion in IELTS Speaking Part 2, this will definitely help you. So now moving on to IELTS Speaking Part 3. Part 3 is very challenging for some, just because in IELTS Speaking Part 3, the questions could literally bounce from a topic you talked about in IELTS Speaking Part 2 or maybe something completely different. So you need to make sure that you are able to talk for 3 to 4 sentences maximum in IELTS Speaking Part 3. So every question the examiner asks you, you should be able to answer in full sentences. And like I said, the topics vary in IELTS Speaking Part 3. They could be based on technology, science, a question he asked you in IELTS Speaking Part 2. So it may completely vary, and you need to make sure that you are ready for this part. And one other thing I want to mention, guys, about IELTS speaking section is do not over talk or do not continue rambling on. If you are done talking, just stay quiet. Do not continue talking and try to structure your answers correctly, because if you answer a question that's too long, the examiner will actually stop you and move to the next question, and that doesn't look so good. So make sure you are able to structure your answers and speak for 3 to 4 sentences maximum for each given question he asks you. So there you have it, guys, the 4 components of the IELTS exam: listening, writing, speaking, and reading. Make sure you are able to understand each component in detail. And guys, if you want to learn more about the exam, make sure you stay tuned for the different videos in this series of IELTS preparation for beginners and an introduction to the exam. Guys, make sure you check out this video up above of certain IELTS speaking questions you may see on your exam. Make sure you don't memorize the answer, and make sure you just remember how to structure your answer. I'll see you in that video over there.